Last in extreme old age, the prey of death, dismiss we willing to the realms beneath, to thy fair palace and the blissful plains, where happy spirits dwell and Pluton reigns. Thus ends the Orphic hymn to Persephone, Thomas Taylor translation, an ancient hymn from a collection of short religious poems known as the Orphic hymns, written in Greek and thought to be composed between the 3rd century BCE and the 2nd century CE, and which are frequently used in ritual worship by modern Hellenic pagans. Many of the Orphic hymns ask for the blessings of good health and long life, with the hymn to Persephone in particular requesting that the supplicant achieve Geras, old age. Old age is personified in Greek myth as a spirit or daemon. Geras, depicted as a shrivelled-up old man, and often contrasted with Hebe, the daemon of youth. Geras is often portrayed in a very negative manner in Greek myth, and is seen as one of many malevolent daemons who were the children of Nyx or night, though Nyx is not a malevolent goddess herself. My name is Ariadne Rainbird, and I'm talking today about Geras, the daemon of old age. Hesiod describes the origin of Geras in his Theogony as such: and Nyx bare hateful Moros, doom, and black Ker, violent death, and Thanatos, death, and she bare Hypnos, sleep, and the tribe of the Oniroi, dreams, and again the goddess, murky Nyx, though she lay with no one, bare Momos, blame, and painful Easy, misery, and the Hesperides, and she also bare the Moirai, the fates, also deadly Nyx bare Nemesis, envy, to afflict mortal men, and after her Aparte, deceit, and Pholites, friendship, and hateful Geras, old age, and hard-hearted Eris, strife. Likewise, Homer does not treat Geras any better. In the Homeric hymn to Aphrodite, Geras is referred to as loathsome, harsh and ruthless, standing at some point beside every mortal, and deadly and wearying, and dreaded even by the gods. There is little record of Geras ever being given honour, but rather hated and feared, though Philostratus, in the life of Apollonius of Tyana, says that in the city of Gadara, a Greek colony in Gibraltar, that the people are so excessively religious that they have even set up an altar to Geras, and, unlike any other race, they also sang hymns in honour of Thanatos, death. The Orphic hymns include a hymn to Thanatos, significantly the last in the collection of hymns, which again, like the hymn to Persephone, petitions the god to allow the supplicant to achieve old age. If the Orphic hymns include a prayer to Thanatos, then perhaps it was not quite so unusual as Philostratus would have us believe, and if Thanatos was worshipped more widely than just by the inhabitants of the city of Gadara, then maybe Geras was also, though Orphism perhaps cannot be taken as typical of mainstream Greek religion. Modern pagans often do include deities associated with death and even ageing in worship, and modern Hellenic pagans likewise express their religion in unique ways, drawing on the spirit of ancient Greece, but practising a religion for modern times. In particular, some modern Hellenic pagans choose to worship deities for whom evidence of ancient cult status is lacking. Hellenic religion was extremely broad, with many ideas, philosophies and different cult practices, which varied from region to region and over time, as well as there being many different cults and philosophies in competition with each other, even at a single point in history. So my aim is to explore the different attitudes to Geras, the daemon of old age, and of ageing itself in the Greek world, and to look at what we can take forward from this into the modern age and how we can honour Geras as modern pagans. Chris Gilliard in 2007 discussed attitudes towards old age in Greek literature and remarks on the ancient Greek practice of seeing the world often in black and white terms, with distinct categories such as the division between youth and old age, with youth being seen as desirable, heroic and beautiful, and old age as ugly and tragic, with no middle ground. Gilliard argues that in Western culture we seek to prolong life, but also to prolong youth, due to a repressed and disguised disgust at the decay of old age, which was expressed more clearly and openly in ancient Greek society. In modern society, the desire for long life is at odds with the undesirable nature of an aged and disabled body. In modern society's anti-ageing agenda and ideas of successful ageing, Gilliard argues that old age is no longer represented as a cause for laughter or lamenting as in ancient Greece, but as a constant threat that requires us to be ever vigilant to prevent us from being overcome by. We need to look after our health, take various supplements, manage our diet, and use a variety of anti-ageing products with the aim of achieving both agelessness and long life. Gilliard argues where once the antithesis between these two goals was readily acknowledged, as in the choice presented to Achilles by his mother Thetis between a heroic youth and a contented old age, contemporary culture either denies or ignores it. Successful ageing, Gilliard argues, is old age without old age. In contrast, the ancient Greeks did not have any science of gerontology or any system of anti-ageing medicine, but rather, to philosophers such as Epicurus, length of life did not matter, but death should not be feared. Gilliard cites Aristotle as criticising old people for fearing death and always trying to prolong life. Gilliard argues that the ancient Greek culture of neither denying the wish for longevity nor repressing the disgust at the physical consequences is healthier than a society that represses these feelings. Greek plays, both tragic and comedic, often have ageing characters within them, giving us some idea of how ageing and old people were viewed in Greek society, particularly in Athens. Old men in the tragedies are often portrayed as once powerful figures who have lost that power, such as Oedipus at Colonus by Sophocles, where Oedipus, former king of Thebes, is a blind old man in a state of poverty, seeking help from the city of Athens. Oedipus laments his lot, describing himself as no more the man of Oedipus, and upon whom long life and sorrow is written. The chorus of elders reflect Oedipus's lament, saying, "In the accumulation of many years pain is in plenty, and joy not anywhere, when life is overspent. Since once the simple playtime of our youth is behind us, what woe is missing, what fierce agony is absent, until, at length, unloved, unkind, unfriended age, worst ill of all, at last consume our strength." Old women in Greek tragedy, Gilliard argues, are generally portrayed as supportive, matronly figures, such as an old nurse or servant, well-intentioned but powerless. Hecuba, wife of Priam and queen of defeated Troy, echoes Oedipus's sorry state in Euripides' Hecuba. She says, "Hold the old woman up, your fellow slave now. Trojans, once your queen, now hold up my arms and take me, support me. I am old. I must lean on this curved stick and struggle to make my stiff joints and slow feet move a little faster." However, Gilliard, in his analysis, does not discuss the more positive depictions of old men and old women in archaic literature. Priam and Nestor, for example, in the Iliad and the Odyssey respectively, are both treated as dignified and wise old men, with much respect. Hecuba, the Trojan queen, is likewise treated respectfully, although the ending is tragic for Priam and Hecuba. In comedy, however, old men and old women are figures of ridicule. Old men are frequently portrayed in comedy as being in conflict with their grown-up sons, echoing conflict that existed in society between fathers and sons, and which is also reflected in myths, such as the myth of Kronos castrating his father Uranus, and in turn being defeated by his own son Zeus. In Aristophanes' Clouds, the old man Strepsiades pushes his layabout son to attend Socrates' school of sophistry, but he refuses. So Strepsiades goes himself. Once he has gained some basic skills in sophistry, he goes home to practice them on his son. His son, however, sees his father as gullible and foolish and considers having his father certified as senile. The son then attends a school of sophistry himself, learns better than his father, and ends up physically beating his father due to his ignorant and outdated ideas, justifying this by saying that his father beat him when he was a child, and that senility is twice over childish. Old men in comedy are depicted as fat, wrinkled, bent over, and with enlarged but flaccid penises, much as Geras himself is depicted. The enlarged but flaccid penis contrasts with the images of young men in classical art, who are always depicted with small penises, which symbolises a control over lustful and lascivious behaviour, whilst large penises were considered vulgar and symbolising a lack of self-control. Old women in comedy are often portrayed as desiring sex, but being physically disgusting. In Aristophanes' Ecclesiazusæ, or Women in Power, women's rule is established, and the women make their demands. A law is passed that sex between a young male and a young female is permitted only if every elderly female is satisfied she herself has been satisfied by the said young male. A young man forced to service 3 old women refers to them as old prunes and dirty old bags, and states that sleeping with them is like sleeping with death. Although Gilead's stance is that modern society denies and fears old age rather than treating it comedically, a similar comedic effect was employed in relatively recent times by Harry Enfield with his lovely wobbly randy old ladies, who were also, like in ancient Greek comedy, played by men. So maybe modern times aren't so different after all. Gilead argues that in the archaic period, old age, whilst still presented as undesirable, lacks the focus on the loss of power and authority expressed in the classical tragedies, but focuses on the loss of physical beauty and sexuality. Gilead quotes Sappho, "For my once tender body old age now has seized. My hair's turned white in place of black. My heart's grown heavy. My knees will not support me, that once on a time were fleet for the dance as fawns. This state I often regret. But what's to be done? Being human, there's no way not to grow old." The Homeric hymn to Aphrodite tells the story of the goddess Eos's love for the mortal Tithonus, whom she asked Zeus to bless with eternal life, but forgot to ask him also to have eternal youth. As a result, Tithonus continues to grow old, and although Eos still loves and cherishes him, she no longer desires him sexually. Eventually, when he can no longer move his limbs, she places him in a room with shining doors and leaves him to babble endlessly. The ageing process is seen as inevitable for mortals, and not even the goddesses can stop it. Life may be prolonged, but Geras cannot be kept away. Aphrodite tells her own mortal lover, and she says, "Harsh old age will soon enshrine you, ruthless age which stands some day at the side of every man, deadly, wearying, dreaded even by the gods." Gilead quotes Theognis, "To be young twice is not permitted, mortals, by the gods, nor to be free from death. Vile old age will come, destructive, and lay his hands on top of all our heads." This is from Theognis' Elegies. Gilead also points to more cheery views of old age in the works of the archaic poets Anacreon and Archilochos. He states that Anacreon was seen as a boozy old poet who, despite his white hair and wrinkled skin, still gazes amorously with a lascivious eye at attractive youth, and still at times felt able to party with the young. Archilochus saw old age as a time for idleness, when one was allowed to be foolish. Gilead discusses the emphasis of classical Greek society on youth, beauty and strength, and how the loss of these in old age led to the devaluation of old age. However, despite this, old men still held power in classical Greek society. He argues that age remained for both men and women in classical Greece a source of authority, and that despite the way the poets and playwrights portrayed old age, many of them lived to old age and continued to be respected. Gilead argues that the Greek disdain for old age did not necessarily mean that there was a disdain for old people, who are often respected. In Greek society, there were various laws regarding children being required to look after their elderly parents, with severe penalties if they did not. Senility meant that an old person was given the status of a minor, and their possessions would be given to their children. This is not much difference to modern society, where if an old person with dementia is deemed to lack capacity, their children or the state will take control of their finances and affairs. Gilead argues that in Athenian society, the culture of challenging authority meant that it became increasingly difficult for respect for old people to be maintained. In Sparta, on the other hand, age was respected and unchallenged, with respect for age being indoctrinated into the young from a very early age. Sparta was a military society. All men were soldiers, but once they were too old to serve in the army, at the age of 60, they would become eligible to join the Gerousia, the Council of Elders, which formed Sparta's advisory body and was its supreme court. Sparta was thus governed by old men, in direct contrast to Athens, whose emphasis on democracy and the questioning of power stood against the seizing of power by an aged elite. Delat, in 2016, argued that respect for old age declines in democracies and is more prevalent in less democratic societies. Geras, as one of the dreadful offspring of night, Neeks, afflicts only mortals of our race, whereas according to Hesiod, the earliest races of men didn't have to face Geras. The visitation of Geras upon humanity was a symbol of our break with the divine. Gilead argues that those closest to the gods despise old age the most, and cites Achilles' choice in the Iliad of a short life with Kleos lasting glory over a long and comfortable life. However, he neglects to mention Achilles' regret of this choice in the Odyssey, when Odysseus visits his spirit in Hades. Gilead concludes that the desire for unending youth in modern society disguises a repressed disgust for the physical decay of old age. Whereas in ancient Greece, the open ridicule of and lamentations about old age, which appeared in comedies and tragedies, allowed the people to accept old age as part of the comedy and tragedy of life itself, rather than trying to escape from the inevitable or denying its existence. He concludes that disgust for old age was not disguised, and for that reason there was no need to disguise old age. Ruth Skodal, in 1980, discussed the life and death of Hesiod and the legends concerning him having a double life or being twice young. Greek and Latin stories tell of a contest between Homer and Hesiod, and later of Hesiod's seduction of a woman who became the mother of the poet Stesichorus. Hesiod would have been extremely old at this time, if he had been contemporary with Homer, the affair proving his sustained vigour and sexual virility even in old age, perhaps suggesting that Hesiod gained a renewed vigour and youth in becoming a poet. However, Skodal argues that there's no reason to think that becoming a poet confers an infusion of youth, particularly as the chorus of old men in the Agamemnon by Aeschylus speak of how it is their old age which gives them authority. In archaic poetry, Skodal says, Hebe has a meaning that is more than just youth, but is a word used in contrast to both childhood and to old age. The word Hebe is closely associated with the word be, meaning life force, and is connected with the ideas of force, vitality, and vital energy. Ideas of a second life or second youth occur from time to time in Greek mythology, despite Theognis' assertion that we cannot be young twice. Various mythic characters were rejuvenated by Medea through cooking their bodies in a potion boiled up in a cauldron, and Aristophanes has his character Demos in his comedy Knights chopped up and cooked in a cauldron by a sausage seller, before emerging with a renewed vigour. In the myth of Dionysos Zagreus, Dionysos was dismembered, boiled up in a cauldron, and later born again when Zeus gave Semele a potion made from his heart to drink. Thus, Skodel argues, the themes of death and rebirth and rejuvenation in myth appear to be variations on the same theme, perhaps reflecting a shamanic initiative experience. Skodel goes on to discuss Heracles' descent and return from Hades in Euripides' play, in which the desire to escape the clutches of old age is explored in some detail. In the play, the chorus complain of their own old age and express the wish that the gods would bless the good with a second youth. This second youth, however, involves a return from Hades, the realm of the dead, and can thus be seen as meaning an afterlife. Heracles had achieved the journey to the realm of the dead and had returned. He is seen as a symbol of youth and vigour, though there is no indication that he was old when he made his descent. Upon Heracles' death, he is immortalised, achieving agelessness and deathlessness, thus defeating Geras and Thanatos. The theme of Heracles defeating Geras is a subject of a number of 5th century BCE Attic vase paintings. It is unusual for old age to be represented on Greek vase paintings, but where they do, it is generally in scenes from mythology, with older men being Homeric heroes, kings, leaders or sages, depicting the positive aspects of old age, wisdom, experience and diplomacy. Sometimes older people are also depicted in scenes of everyday life, such as nurses, fathers or patriarchs, and are characterised mostly by white hair and thinning hair and baldness in the case of men, a bent and frail-looking body or being obese. Old women are less often shown than old men, as women, particularly aristocratic women, are generally depicted as beautiful and ageless in art. Gozzolini describes a vase painting showing a warrior's departure, where an older man and a young man sit facing each other, possibly depicting a father and son, and muses about whether the father is reminiscing about his youth, or whether the son is recollecting the many battles his father has been in, and has returned from to live a long life. Gozzolini describes the figure of the father as depicting knowledge, experience and self-control, but an acceptance of one's age as well. Heracles, after his descent and return from Hades, marries Hebe, emphasising his attainment of eternal youth. The story of Heracles' descent and return, as well as his subsequent deification, can be seen as reflecting beliefs amongst the Orphics and Pythagoreans, as a model of what initiates could expect from initiation into the mysteries. His eternal youth is a symbol of the afterlife. Geras, or old age, is defeated in death, and the soul is renewed, gaining everlasting youth, freed from the shackles of mortality. Initiation itself enacts this mystery, with initiates in the Bacchic Orphic mysteries wearing crowns of white poplar, as Heracles had brought back from Hades. This idea of recovered or eternal youth is the reward of those who have lived a special or heroic life. In Euripides' Supplicants, the poet has the old man Iphis imagine a second life, where the lessons of the first life would be carried through and not forgotten, to be able to repeat experiences and learn from them, such that the second life would be better than the first, even though it would ultimately also end in old age and death, alluding to the idea of metempsychosis, or transmigration of the soul. The chorus of old women, whilst praising youth and lamenting their old age, which weighs upon them like Mount Etna, also point to their roles as singers, who, like poets, should be considered to be in the realm of special people and heroes. Skodel argues that inevitably poetry and song function as a consolation, a second best to the recovery of youth. Mnemosyne, or memory, is mother of the muses and patron goddess of poets. It is also Mnemosyne who gives Hesiod his poetic rejuvenation through the muses. Skodel also cites Callimachos, who in his Aetia, whilst wishing to escape old age, discusses the cicada, which sings but does not suffer old age, because it simply sloughs its skin, its Geras. The gift of the muses is seen by Callimachos as being a true metamorphosis. Juliana de Bias, date unknown, discusses the idea that if wisdom takes time to develop, then the older one is, the more chance there should be of being wise. De Biasis cites Plato, who, in his Republic, said that to become a philosopher takes training for many years in the good life, and in order to be wise enough to govern a polis or city-state, leaders must have such training. Thus Plato argued that in his ideal society, the leaders should be old men, skilled in philosophy and having studied ethics and virtue. De Bias also argues that the connection between old age and wisdom becomes more likely once society has developed a strong and positive idea of an afterlife. Old age then becomes a kind of intermediary position between life and the afterlife, when one is more closely connected to the spirit world or divine realm, and may therefore have access to more special kinds of knowledge. De Bias argues that a stronger idea of an immortal soul came about in ancient Greece with the philosophy of Pythagoras, and quotes Diogenes Laertius's Life of Pythagoras. It behoved men to honour their elders, thinking that which was precedent in point of time more honourable. Pythagoras divided life into 4 stages or seasons, each season lasting for around 20 years, meaning that old age, the winter of life, was from around the age of 60 to 80. Pythagoras taught a doctrine of metempsychosis, or transmigration of the soul, with the way we live our current life affecting our next. In Plato's Republic, Plato has Socrates meeting with an old man, Cephalus, who discusses the benefits of old age. Cephalus says that the more bodily pleasures decrease, the more desire and pleasure of conversations increase. And Socrates responds that he enjoys conversing with the old due to the fact that they have already taken the long journey that he may also take. For Plato's Socrates, old people are depositories of knowledge and wisdom, and can teach us about the trials on our journey towards death and the afterlife, and how to deal with the difficulties we may face on the way. Cephalus tells Socrates that many old people spend too much time regretting what they have lost and indulging in memories of the pleasures of youth, such that they do not recognise all the gains of old age, which he describes as peace and freedom derived from having been rescued from the foolish mastery of instincts. For Cephalus, those who complain about old age do so not because old age is bad, but because they are of bad character. When Socrates points out that Cephalus is rich, which may be the reason he is comfortable and happy in old age, Cephalus responds that riches will not help a man of bad character, but will only help if he is of good character and does not misuse his wealth. Aristotle was less positive about old age than Plato, and did not connect old age with wisdom, but with action. Aristotle thought that old people were often greedy, wanting to gather wealth, which he considered a characteristic prevalent wherever there was feebleness. Wisdom, then, doesn't necessarily simply come with old age, but with a combination of time, being of good character, and living a good life. Roman philosophy developed some of the ideas of Greek philosophy, and the Stoic philosopher Cato the Elder, according to the Roman philosopher and statesman Cicero, discusses old age and wisdom, saying, "The best arms in old age are knowledge and practice of virtue, that if cultivated in every age, after a long and intense life, produce marvellous fruits, not only because they do not vanish at the very end of life, a very important thing, but because awareness of a well-spent life and memories of many good actions are very great satisfactions. Cato, according to Cicero, also said that the young are typically rash and reckless, whereas it is more typical of the old to be wise. Old men do not simply do the same as the young, but do more and better things, arguing that great actions are not the product of strength, speed, or physical agility, but of intelligence, authority, and good judgment, qualities of which usually old age not only is not deprived, but richer. Cato refutes the 4 common arguments used against old age: loss of memory, inertia, lack of sensual pleasure, and closeness to death. He argues that memory can be kept intact through exercising the intellect, and that only the lazy or those constitutionally stupid will lack memory or intellect in later life. Cato gives many examples of philosophers, poets, and other famous people from history who were intellectually sharp in late life. He also argues that study and meditation prevents inertia, and that many of the losses of ability in old age are due to vices during youth. Regarding the loss of sensual pleasures, Cato argues that it is a good thing to be free from such things, as the more intense sensual pleasures and the desire for them is, the less we are inclined to reason and intellectual pursuits, but that old age has its own pleasures. Regarding old age being close to death, Cato argues that the soul is immortal, and argues for a virile acceptance of death. Cicero, in his Seneca's letters to Lucilius, has Seneca say that senectus, old age, has strengthened him against adversities. Seneca sees both the benefits and disadvantages of old age, and believes that we must prepare for old age and death through meditation. Seneca also speaks of the advantages of retiring from active life and having more time to practice philosophy. Attitudes to old age in the Greek and Roman world then were varied, and highlighted both positive and negative aspects of ageing, and old people were treated in poetry and theatre with attitudes ranging from respect to pity to ridicule. However, unlike in modern society, the ancient Greeks and Romans did not try to deny old age or to hide the elderly away. Old age, like death, was seen as an inevitable stage of life, for those who had the privilege of living long enough to experience it. As Gilead argues, being able to laugh at old age and acknowledge our negative feelings about it may be a healthier attitude than trying to deny its existence. Greek and Roman philosophy also discuss how we can age well through living a good life and through the practices of meditation and philosophy, and how the loss of certain aspects of life, such as intense physical desires and a reduction of sensual pleasures, can bring freedom and allow us to focus on self-development and the spiritual life. Modern research in gerontology has also focused on the benefits of meditation and spiritual practice in old age, as well as the concept of a gerotranscendence, where the older person transitions from a focus on the material world, rationality and social life, to focus on the transcendent and to connection with the cosmos. Developing beliefs in an afterlife also led to a greater respect for the elderly, who may be seen as being between the worlds and closer to the spirit realm. Retirement allows more time to focus on meditation, philosophy, and spiritual pursuits. The Orphic mysteries focused on an afterlife with the gods, and the Orphic hymns ask for a long life, perhaps because we need to live a long life as well as a good life, in order to attain sufficient wisdom to have a blessed afterlife. Geras, then, the daemon and personification of old age, is a double-natured daemon, who brings both curses and blessings. But how we see him and what he brings us depends, as Plato's Cephalus tells us, on our own character and how we live our lives. Spiritual practice can lead to a more optimistic and positive view of old age, and enable us to see the positive gifts Geras brings. Like the people of the city of Gadara, then, modern Hellenic and eclectic pagans would do well to give Geras due respect and honour. And going to finish now by reciting a hymn to Geras, which I have written. To Geras. Hail, Geras, bane of mankind, blessed and cursed, mortal and divine. O Daemon of advancing years, give us the courage to face our fears. Progeny of Neeks, brother of fate, of Moros, blame and cold-hearted hate, sibling to despair and portending doom, of Thanatos, death, and Isis, gloom, and of Eris, goddess of troublesome strife, and Philotis, who brings joy to life. You bring all that comes with longevity. May we accept our lot with levity, knowing it is the price we must pay for the blessed life for which we pray. Let us with good humour face fading strength and lessening grace, freed from youth's bewilderment and shackles of toil to time well spent, experience gained and lessons learned, self-mastery and wisdom earned. Let us with wisdom of a sage enjoy the repose that comes with age. With joyful memories, Mnemosyne's gift, and blessings of a life well lived. And if our minds and wits grow dim, accept our folly and turn within. Our minds moved from earthly desire, freed from care our souls inspire. Geras, we are blessed when you come, grateful that we have not died young. For many do not live to see your face in our mortality. Teach us to let go of the outworn, freed from attachment to worldly form. As limbs grow weary and bodies fail, we look to life beyond the veil, preparing to go willingly to the blessed realm of Persephone. This prayer is available on a prayer card from my Etsy shop. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please do like the video and subscribe to my channel.